but I think that what you were saying, it gives you, it like clues you in. It's like a map. It's like, I think a lot of actors also say, like, you know, follow the text. It will teach you what you need to know, and that's like the same with sound.
Exactly. No, it's absolute sound. I mean, you can't be expected to come on if people, like the editor might be working on the film for 4 or 5, 6 months with the director closely every single day, developing a story, developing a life for the film. And then, you know, the sound person comes on 5 weeks before the very end and is expected to sort of fix all the problems and add and make a contribution to the narrative. I mean, it's a lot to expect of anybody, and sort of the earlier you start thinking about it, the more effort you put into it in the stages of pre-production and production, the better you're going to be able to, you know, make use of it.
Can I ask you a question about a quote you said in Editor's Guild magazine?
Sure.
Which was about your work with Robert Altman. You said that you appreciate his quest for authenticity in sound. Can you like elaborate on that and what it was like working with him?
Okay, so I mean, that was certainly a highlight of my life, professional life, just getting to work with him. You know, anybody who's seen any of his films, he's not a fantasy filmmaker, with the exception maybe of Popeye. But he's trying to portray reality on some, or on the level of reality as he sees it. And so he's not so interested in whiz-bangs and explosions. He's interested in people and what they do and the reality of their lives. I think that article might have been talking about the company. I can't remember, but I know when we spotted for the company, which for those of you who haven't seen it, is one of his later films, and it's about a dance company in Chicago, and there's a lot of ballet and a lot of dancing, obviously. And we were looking at it, and he said, you know, I want to hear the sounds of their feet when they're dancing. And, you know, there's a ton of dancing all over this film. And that would be Foley, because of course when they're recording on location, they're not able to get close enough to record that sound. For the most part, because he shoots mostly in a wider frame. So I thought about it, and I thought, you know, there's no way that I'm going to get a Foley artist in New York, on a Foley stage in New York, to recreate the sound of that very specific, and he told me it's a very specific sound, what that, I think it's called Marley makes when you jump on it, or when you even just step on it. It's not like a floor, it's not like anything else. So what the idea was, I ended up getting a group of location Foley people who rented out a dance studio. We got the dancers from the film to fly to Toronto, because that's where this was, and spend 4 days recording the actual, them redoing their dances with the focus on recording it. And I tell you, it's an amazing feeling to hear that sound, because it was like butter going into tracks. First of all, the dancers knew their steps, so sync wasn't a big issue. Once you get the first step in, the other ones followed very easily. And the sound was so authentic and so real, the mixers didn't have to barely touch the tracks. It just fit right in. And, you know, and Altman appreciated it, and I just was so excited about it, because I hadn't really been able to do anything like that before. And it changed my whole view of Foley, and how now I approach Foley is much more about, okay, how can I make it authentic? How can, you know, because there's no point in doing it if you're just going to have generically sounding, you know, footsteps for everything. It's the nuance of what it takes to get through an entire Foley for a film doesn't really often allow for what you can do in a small room with, kind of dead acoustics. So on Dead in Real Life, for instance, there was that whole 90% of that film takes place in one house. Well, I found out that house is, and there are a lot of people in it all the time moving around, but that house was a rental house in Rhode Island that we could get for a couple of weekends, or a week I think it was, and go up there, and we recorded all the Foley for that film, all the footsteps, in that actual house. And I can tell you, because we tried doing it in the Foley studio before I said, no, this isn't going to work. And it's just a huge 100% difference. Just so much more alive, and gave that place a sense of space that it just could never have gotten, just with the subtleness of the Foley.
So the authenticity of sound that you obviously use in all your work, do you think that student directors should be concerned about that? Like when they're trying to get their films finished, like a lot of them say, oh, just, do it as quick as you can, like I need to send it to this festival, like, do you think that we should take more time to really get the sound?
That's a leading question. Of course, I mean, yeah, you know what, I would be foolish to say otherwise, because the truth is, the more time you take for these things, the better it's going to be, and the better it is, the better your film is. Don't shortchange your sound location mixer, and give them a chance to do their job well. They're always the most hated people on the set, and I can tell you, it's an awful job, and most sound editors bitch and moan about all the bad sound they're given, but they don't have to do it. And when you're in that position where you're being told at the last minute, it's the most thankless job, that you have to get this, and we've changed we're no longer sticking to the original idea, we're going to change the blocking, and we can't have your room in the shot, and suddenly they have to race to put on lobbies on everybody. I mean, it's a really, really tough job. And, if they're given more time, they will do a better job for the most part. And, if they don't get that time, don't be surprised if you have to, loop it. And looping is one of those things where, I wish people would record the actors. If they know the sound is bad in production, you've got the actors there, they're in the moment, take them aside and do their lines wild in a situation that's quieter, because, it's so hard to get them back 6 months later. Tell them to get back in the mood. They're not working against another actor, and then expect it to be great. So you end up spending a lot of money trying to do things like that, and then you use about, if you're lucky, you use a quarter of it. I can't tell you how many low-budget films where we spent a lot of money recording ADR, and then the director and the actor's not usually happy doing it. The director often is not comfortable with it because it's not what he's or she's used to hearing, and we end up going back to the production, which is compromised. So all these things can be considered ahead of time, and try to make it more of a priority. Deadlines are deadlines. If you have a deadline, you have to rush through everything, and things, maybe Kismet works in your favor, and maybe it doesn't. Often I think giving people time to do their job almost always benefits the film.
We have about 10 minutes left.
Go ahead and ask any questions.
Well, does anybody have any questions for Eliza? Yes.
I do, actually.
Go ahead.
I'm not in film. I'm a photography major, but I've started getting into lots of animations, and I have no sound background at all.
Mm-hmm.
As far as building my own soundtracks for my projects, what would you recommend as some introductory software or just stuff that I can do?
Well, I mean, for animation, I would recommend seeing The Toe Tactic, because that's Emily Hubley, and she's an animator, and I did the sound for that. That was really fun. I mean, the tools of sound these days are basically Pro Tools. Other things I'm sure work too. I've never used GarageBand, but